Good morning or afternoon, everybody, and welcome to SafetyChain's very first How-To series for 2014. As many of you are joining us today know that we have our FSMA Friday series with Dr. Atchison and his team to talk about the topics near and dear to your heart when it comes to all of the FSMA rules. And we follow those up with our How-To series, where we show you how food safety chain management can help you automate some of the challenges that many of you are facing with FSMA. Today's topic is how to automate for FSMA supply chain controls and recall plan rules and best practices. I'm Barbara Levin. I'll be your host as well as one of your presenters today, and I'm joined by our SafetyChain How-To team, Dave Detweiler and Dan Bernkoff. So welcome, Dave and Dan. Before we begin, let me give you a couple of important housekeeping announcements. If you're having any technical issues, our How-To series is hosted by WebEx. You can call their helpline directly, and you can see the number on the screen there. I guess if any of you are having trouble logging in, I'll say that out loud, 877-509-3239. We had a report of some technical issues this morning, but I think they've all been resolved. Everybody will receive by close of business tomorrow a link where they can download a copy of the slides as well as the recording of today's event. We will be taking your questions at the end of the at the end of the presentations, and all of you will be able to at that point answer your questions online. For your privacy as well, you can only see the names of the hosts and the presenters and your name. You cannot see the names of the other attendees. So our How-To series has got a very high-level agenda here. Going to try to get you out of here in 30 to 45 minutes, probably closer to 45. I hope we've got a lot of questions. We're going to very quickly summarize the key points of these two rules as they were presented to us by the Atchison Group on FSMA Friday. We're going to then look at some of the compliance challenges that companies have with these rules. We're going to then look at how food safety chain management helps. I'm going to then bring Dave on, who's going to show you a quick high-level demo, show you a little bit about what that looks like, and then we're going to bring Dan on to answer all of your questions. So with that, let's move right along. So let's look at the supply chain controls rule and look at some of the key points there. And I think probably the first key point to look at is this first bullet. If you've been looking at all of the different versions that have been coming out, you'll notice that domestic supplier management was redlined out of the current version. It's very obvious that FDA wanted it in. Some of the end folks are demanding that it go back in, and from everything that we're hearing from what Dr. Atchison believes and what we're hearing across the industry is that these controls will in fact come back into the final rule. Excuse me. It's believed that they will be aligned very closely with what we've already been discussing with the foreign supplier verification program, the idea being that that the rule needs to be aligned, that we can't ask more foreign suppliers than we do of domestic suppliers, and we should have those same controls. So with that, the key points are likely to include that you will need a robust approved vendor program. Not that companies don't have those programs already, but as we know with FSMA, if it's not documented, you might as well have not done it. So you're going to have to show, do you have all of your supplier documents? Can you confirm that your suppliers have assessed their hazards and put preventive controls in place? Do you have visibility into safety test results and corrective or preventive actions that were put in place? And how are you going to verify and validate? Very likely, it's believed that the same options that are in the foreign supplier verification program will be in the domestic supplier management rule. So if you recall, those two options, if you've got a high-risk product, it's believed that we're going to see that same third-party auditor rule domestically, that high-risk products are going to require third-party auditing. For the other products, you're going to have to show your own validation and verification through inbound COAs, your own sampling to specs. It is believed that the rule will be one step back, but, you know, when you look at the prevention focus of FSMA, it's a lot of talk about visibility and transparency. So there's going to be, you know, some pressure to show that, A, you know all of your suppliers are, and that you're, you know, taking steps to make sure that your suppliers are following all of these same rules for their suppliers. If you look at the recall plan rule and best practices, if you have to comply with the preventive control for human food rule and the new feed and pet food rule, you have to have a recall plan. Now, you know, this isn't anything new. I know very few companies that don't have a recall plan, but here it's got to have a few other things. It's got to be a written plan. That plan needs to include very specific points about how you're going to notify direct recipients as well as the public. It needs to show how you're going to conduct your effectiveness checks to make sure that recalls are in fact carried out properly. It has to have a plan for what you're going to do with the product, whether it needs to be destroyed, whether it needs to be reworked, how you're going to keep product that needs to be destroyed from going back into e-commerce. And best practices outside of FSMA. These are the things, when we show you what it looks like, that we're going to be focusing on here today. As most of you know, food safety chain management is a suite of food safety and quality assurance capabilities on the preventive side versus recall management. So if you look at the best practices outside of FSMA, these are things in a lot of GFSI schemes, you know, root cause analysis and traceability. What came in and were the safety specs verified? What did you do with it when it came in and was that documented? What condition was it when it left to go to the next point in the chain? And what have you been doing in terms of continuous improvement and everything else to make sure that you're preventing food safety events or nonconformances in the first place? So those are all the rules. Now, is everybody ready? Everybody that we talk to is facing a lot of challenges when it comes to these rules, mostly around the manual nature of a lot of food safety and quality assurance organizations today. So for compliance, for supply chain controls, volume has always been and is going to continue to be one of the biggest challenges. HARPC verifications, supplier audit documentations, all of the registrations, all of the certificates, and all of these documents with different specs and different dates. It makes it very difficult to track, to make sure that you are getting everything that you need to be in compliance and to assure that the supplies that are coming in to you are meeting all of the safety requirements and are not going into production. The other thing with manual processes that makes it very difficult is to access accurate and actionable data. So A, is all of your information coming from suppliers complete? And can you get your hands on it? You know, is it in a bunch of different spreadsheets? Is it in different systems, which might be electronic but don't talk to each other? Maybe they're in different facilities. How easy is it for you to get ready for an audit? And I know that we're talking about FSMA, not GFSI, but it all kind of related here. Many of you realize or have seen the news now that if you're an SQF shop, starting in July of this year, 1 in 3 SQF audits can be unannounced. So how fast can you get your information to respond to an FDA or a GFSI or any audit, really? Do you have the information for supplier scorecards to make sure that you are working with the suppliers that are giving you the best product? Do you have all the information that you need for continuous improvement? If you think about the two options for validating and verifying, how fast are you getting data? If you're doing samples at the loading dock, for example, how fast are you getting information for nonconformance so that you can take a corrective or preventive action? And again, as I said, supply chain controls aren't just for FSMA. You need those for your customer specifications and for all of the GFSI approved vendor programs. What are some of the challenges for a recall plan? Again, we're focusing on the preventive side. We're focusing on what are the things that you can do to prevent recalls from happening in the first place. I don't think anybody can say that you can prevent every single recall. But a lot of them can be prevented if you can meet some of these challenges. How well are all of your SOPs and your PRPs and the GMPs that are documented? Are the latest programs being followed and the latest forms? How early, again, are you able to collect all of your safety and quality data for corrective actions? And how accessible and accurate is all of the data that you have for root cause analysis and traceability, and how fast can this be done? This is really all about speed. So we said that this is a how-to, so we're going to look now at how does food safety chain management technology help you meet these challenges. I'm going to start with kind of a look at how it works, and then we're going to turn it over to Dave to tell you how it looks, show you what it looks like, excuse me. Anyhow, very quickly and at the highest level, food safety chain management is designed to help enforce food safety and quality assurance in real time. The whole concept here is to go very far in preventing non-compliant raw materials and ingredients from coming in and non-compliant finished products from going out. It's all about prevention and creating efficiencies. So how does this happen? Well, you'll be seeing in the demo, first, all of those regulatory and non-regulatory requirements. Today we're talking about FDA, but obviously this can be your GFSI, your USDA requirements, are all set up and defined in the system. In addition to the regulatory requirements, all of the supporting programs and all of the components of your various food safety plans are also set up in the system. Your supplier compliance programs is what we've been speaking about. Your HACCP and preventive controls, all of your requirements for things like customer and third-party audits, product specifications, all of your forms, information coming from labs. All of these are set up in the system in 3 different ways. First is workflow, scheduling, and notification. Remember, part of the challenge is making sure that you're doing what you say that you're doing. So you can schedule when all of your SOPs have to be done. Here, we're talking about supply chain controls. You have schedules of when documents are due, and notifications go out saying when something is due. So everything is scheduled. Notifications are going out, whether this is a piece of your plan, whether these are some preventive controls that need to take place, or whether you're notifying a supplier that a document is due. All of this information goes into a central repository of data. It doesn't matter how many suppliers are sending in information. It doesn't matter how many facilities are sending in information. All of this information is then analyzed in real time according to specs. If there's a test result that's non-conforming, if there's a supplier document that didn't come in, real-time alerts go out to all of the relevant stakeholders. All of this information is then in a central database for reporting and analysis. So what does this do for you? Well, it gives you real-time data trending. That's that actionable data. It also gives you the ability to do continuous improvement. It helps you be audit ready, and it also helps you then manage all of your supplier compliance as well as your customer compliance. So kind of the big picture. Dave's big picture is not as good as a demo, so why don't we turn it over to you? You can show us what this looks like, and then we'll tell you a little bit about SafetyChain's food safety chain management solution and bring Dan in to answer questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Barbara. And I'm not going to lie, Barbara, I'm a little bit upset now that we have this how-to team. I don't have my jersey yet, so I'm a little bit upset. So if you could send that over, that would be great.
That's the hat. They're on their way.
So imagine, right, I have 4 different examples here today just for the webinar, right, to kind of keep it short. We can obviously spend hours on this. But what I thought is I have 4 basic examples, and I want to start out with the thought of what if you could come to a website, right? And that's what SafetyChain is, right? We're a software as a service solution, and what it enables our customers to do is log into a website. And what if you could see something like this? So for some of your folks on the phone, you saw Barbara go through, and she talked a lot about, and the first example I'll talk about here is documentation management, right? She talked a lot about, hey, do you have all your supplier documents together, and what does that look like? Well, imagine you sitting there at your desk today watching the webinar. You just logged into a site that says, hey, by the way, here's all the recently submitted documents you've received from your suppliers, right? And where they stand maybe in your review process. Or, hey, by the way, here are some recent document requests that the system has automatically generated, right? So documents that are coming up on expiration, and that ability for a system to say, hey, by the way, here's the documents that we're currently looking for, right? Or maybe it's just the overall compliance that you're interested in, right? How are we doing with our documentation and maybe even our questionnaires and our our forms that we might be completing to help evaluate those suppliers? How are we doing, right? So think about that thought. First shot here, I log in. You get a nice little comprehensive view. The really nice thing about the SafetyChain homepages is that they're completely configurable. So these are actually they are widgets. They're reports in the system that any user can actually manipulate to tailor their homepage to what they should see. But if we drill in a little bit deeper in the first example, talking about documentation, right? I'm going to run a report here in the system specifically around supplier documents. And many of you today, as Barbara mentioned, I know you're tracking these today, right? It's how are you tracking them? And a lot of times the question that comes up is, it's maintaining them, right? It's not the one time that you go to get the documents, even though sometimes that might be tough, but most times suppliers want to do business with you, so they give you those documents. It's the ongoing maintenance of those, right? Making sure that they're always up to date. So what I'm going to do here is run a report for all my suppliers and all my documents. And this report will show me very quickly any documents that are out of date, right? Or even upcoming on being due from an expiration date standpoint. So I have my suppliers over here on the left side of my screen. I have the documents that I require of those suppliers going across the middle of the screen here that you're seeing, right? You're seeing some color coding on the screen as well. A typical customer of SafetyChain sets up a system where based on the expiration date of these documents, our system automatically will generate a notice out to the supplier maybe 60 days prior. Hey, Mr. Supplier, your third-party audit document's coming up on being due. Please provide it back, right? There are a couple different ways that suppliers can actually provide it back. They can be provided a link to actually log into the system and upload the document. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Or they could actually email it back, right? Email it back to abccompany@safetychain.com. But the idea here is that we're creating a repository of these documents because you need access to those, right? As part of these requirements, it's not just saying, hey, I have a report that shows me expiration dates on documents, right? It's that ability to actually come into a system and say, hey, by the way, here's my supplier, right? All the supplier information. Here's the documentation I require of that supplier. And oh, by the way, it's ready or available right here at the click of a button, right? In its native format and how you received it. So first piece there around documentation, and you also might have a couple samples here, right? You might be interested in saying, hey, I'm sitting there in the office. Maybe it's an automatic notification that comes out to you, right? Rather than having to log into the system and look at that home page, maybe you'd like to receive a notice. Hey, here are the upcoming expiring documents by supplier, right? Or, as we mentioned, as those documents are updated, maybe you get a notice that says, hey, click here to acknowledge these updated documents that have come in, right? So here's a submission of completed updated forms. Right? So one way we talk just a little bit about documents, and there's kind of two terms that everybody uses, right? The idea of documentation, but then we're also seeing our customers head in this direction of forms as well. The idea that you might have a questionnaire, and I'll show you an example actually as we go through this, a questionnaire that you create, that you send out to your suppliers, right? And might need to be updated on an annual basis or a semi-annual basis, or based on a specific change, that questionnaire might need to be updated. Let's say you have a document program. Within that document program, you have a food safety questionnaire, right? This food safety questionnaire should be sent out maybe to one of your suppliers, right? And as you generate this out to one of your suppliers, right, you actually can select different forms, right? And here we're talking a little bit more about forms where a supplier can actually come in and complete a form. Many of you might be doing that today, where you email a Word document to them and they have to complete that Word document and email it back. And what we've heard from some of our customers is the issue there is many times you'll get an incomplete Word document back, and then you email it back to that supplier and say, hey, you missed question, 72, can you finish that, and then email it back, and it becomes this back and forth process. Never mind the maintenance of it, meaning at the end of the year, you need an updated form again, right? So the idea of using a system like this, where you take your questions, right, as your facility completed a risk assessment, this is just a sample, right? We would mimic any of the questions or within your forms today that you would generate out to a supplier. And the thought here is that you, sitting on the phone today, have a bunch of suppliers. I've now selected a supplier to send this form to, right? And I'm sending it out to this supplier. When I hit finish here, the supplier would actually get a notice, right? Hey, Mr. Supplier, please submit your updated documentation in a timely manner, right? We're asking for a general profile form, certificate of insurance. Click here below to log in and complete the request, okay? So sample now you're communicating with the supplier and actually providing, so let's look at the, I started here originally, right? Let's say we've generated out this form from the system, and let's log out and log back in as if I were that supplier. Hey, now I'm coming back in as a supplier. Scaled down view, right, to the system, but I have my own dashboard, right? So here's my overall compliance for you, right, the customer. And by the way, here are the documents that I've recently submitted, right? Oh, I'm sorry, over here are the ones that I've submitted. Here are the ones that are being requested, right? Here's my food safety questionnaire. And they can simply click on the link to complete that form that you've just generated to them. Required fields, don't allow them to save the form until they've completed all of the required fields, eliminating that back and forth. The system can also verify some of the data that they've completed. If you have, yes, no, pass, fail type questions or things that might knock against the supplier as they complete that form, the system can be set up to do that as well, right? So two different scenarios there, two different samples. One was, hey, you have documents, right? You have a certificate of insurance. You have an allergen certificate, and you need to have a repository for those. And that was the first example I showed you. The second one was, we've seen this evolution now where people are really starting to push out at least once a year a questionnaire to their suppliers to complete. And the ability to provide not only that questionnaire, but a tool for your suppliers to complete that questionnaire, all within one repository, right? So let's take it to a third example and start talking about the doors of your facility, right? Barbara mentioned, as things come in, you might have some verification processes. You might even have a receiving log, something that might look like this, right? So the idea that you can have a system that is, that our system can be set up, right, to create a form that might look like this. It might look familiar to some of you. Some of you might say, my form's bigger, my form's smaller. No, we don't do that, right? Think about the things you're doing today on the, in pen and paper out on the dock, right? So as I come back into the system, the idea here, and what you should see here in a second, there you go, is we can take that form, that receiving form that you have, and put it into our system. And what that allows for is the ability for our system to actually verify the data as it comes in, right? So I'm coming in here to my raw materials section of the system. Let's say I'm bringing in juice concentrate, right? And the idea is that within this, I have a receiving log form. And what we do with each of our customers is we sit down with them, we'll look at the different forms that they have. They may have attributes associated with it, right? In this case, maybe product temperature or truck temperature might be associated with it, minimums, maximums. And again, what this allows our system to do is as the data is completed, again, back to this form, right? As the data is completed, and this is actually an example of one of our Android apps, as this form is completed, our system back here, right, the back end of it can actually verify that the data is within specification or within compliance. Real time. So as the data comes in, the system's actually verifying that information. It can generate notices, text messages, email messages to individuals. It can even create real-time corrective actions. So maybe if, you actually on this form here, you select load was accepted or rejected. If it was rejected, another window may open up asking you to explain that corrective action, right? You'll also notice something else up here on this app, camera, right? A lot of people talk about this. Let me pull back. So now I have this form in the system. The form's been completed. I'm going to come back over here to my home page, and you'll see that I have a recent compliance alert. Well, what's that recent compliance alert that I'm seeing on my home page? If I click on it, you'll see that it was for trailer debris, right? Was the truck clean and free of debris? No, it was not. I have the other data captured right in here. This allows me to report off of everything, right? Because now it lives in a repository of data. You'll also notice in this example, the system has now opened up a corrective action. Maybe the corrective action needs to be completed in a certain period of time. Or maybe there's a preventative action that needs to be captured or accomplished, right? But I was showing you back here on that tablet form, the camera, right? This is something that our customers have really been enamored with, the idea of direct observation, visual observation, right? So in this case, the trailer had debris in it. Oh, by the way, here's the picture of the trailer, right, with the debris, right? Exactly what I saw as I was doing that completion of that form, right? Also, the system will then start to track, as I mentioned, to this completion, these corrective actions or preventative actions or whatever it might be. So, third example, you got things coming in now at the loading dock, just a generic receiving log. I complete that receiving log. I can capture images, I can enter in comments, I can enter in the form itself, and now I can track that back to that supplier, right, or whatever it might be. Last example here is now I have the goods in the facility, and what some of our customers will do once the goods are in the facility is they'll actually do a sampling of that, right? They'll take the goods, generate a sample out to an external laboratory. Maybe you're lucky enough to have an internal laboratory to do some of that work. But the idea is that within the system, I come back to where that form was. Again, here under my juice concentrate, I select the actual raw material that I'm going to test. I select the actual test that I'm going to do. So in this case, I'm going to test for some micros, right? The idea is that our system can now track those attributes of what you're expecting, right? So you have certain minimum or maximum limits for that external laboratory, right? So after they run their checks, today most of you are generating a sample, maybe via email, right? You generate a notice to that external laboratory. At that point, you give the sample to a courier or whatever it might be, and they take it over to the lab. The lab does their tests. They email you back a COA, which you actually manually review and file away. And again, I'm just making an assumption, but we hear a lot of that kind of similar process. Within our system, you can come in here, you pull the sample, you identify which tests should be run, you hit finish, and the laboratory gets an automatic notification, right? And again, I apologize, I didn't have the laboratory selected here, right? Maybe it's a specific external lab that this is going to. Once that lab receives that sample and they run their tests, they will actually generate data directly back to our system so we can verify it, again, against those attributes. So as soon as the data hits our system, you can actually then, it'll verify it automatically. It'll generate emails and text messages. It can even generate an automatic retest, which we see some of our customers doing as well, right? But the idea, again, is now you have this one repository for all this information. So Barbara talks a lot about, documentation and so forth, but the idea that you need a, let me see here, I got, view results. So here's an example of my juice concentrate, right? My micro results. I have the micro results in the system. Oh, by the way, I have my COA in here as well, right, that I received back from that external laboratory. All automated and all providing the capability of verifying that everything's within specification. Everything is what you expected, right? And now it provides you that repository for ongoing tracking and trending and some of that continuous improvement that Barbara mentioned. But a real key element, especially around FSMA, is that prevention, right? That preventative nature. And what we're trying to do here is that at the earliest point, identify anything that might be at risk and help the organization very quickly understand what happens to avoid anything that might happen downstream. So hopefully that helped. Barbara, I know we don't have all day, but I'd love to spend all day on the phone and talking about it, but I'm going to give it back to you, and we'll see if there are any questions that we can respond to.
Great, thank you, Dave. We are going to just go through a few more slides right now to, excuse me, to tell you a little bit about SafetyChain for food. You'll notice that I've taken everybody out of full screen. All of you should be able to see the Q&A tab on the lower right-hand side of your screen now, and you can simply enter your questions and hit send, and we'll get to those in just a moment. SafetyChain helps automate, streamline, and improve food safety and quality assurance with our premier solution, SafetyChain for food. As simple as that: automate, streamline, and improve. Again, the whole thing is about the safety chain that stays one step ahead of your supply chain, making sure that when products come in, what you do with them, and when they leave, that all of your safety and quality requirements are being followed. We help you really in five key areas. First, as we've been discussing, is supplier compliance. Also, food safety and quality assurance program management, things like your HACCP and HARP-C plans, task scheduling, root cause analysis, real-time analysis and alerts, outbound COAs, hold and release, and of course, audits. We help with process management. Again, actionable data, all in one centralized time and date stamped database with all of your regulatory and GFSI and customer compliance needs. And also with mobile data capture through forms and allowing you to get information at the closest point possible. Really, when you think about the whole concept of prevention, SafetyChain is like your smoke alarm in the cloud. We are proactively helping you prevent problems before they start versus reactively trying to figure out where the problem started and how to repair the damage. It's really, really the key to everything about SafetyChain. And I told you I'd keep that to 2 slides. I'm going to put this slide up here. For those of you that do, I've got a couple of private chats here from folks that have asked to, said they've got to leave at the bottom of the hour, so I'm going to give you a quick reminder. Again, by close of business tomorrow, you're going to get an email. It's going to allow you to download the slides and the recording. You can also request a private, more in-depth demo tailored for your needs, pricing and ROI calculator and the like. We've got some fabulous events coming up. On Thursday, we have our quarterly, What is Food Safety Chain Management, for folks that aren't as familiar with it. We're going to go into some of the topics that we spoke about today, but much more in that whole how we help side, all 5 areas. On the 31st of this month, it's FSMA Fridays. We're going to be talking about the animal and sanitary transport rules with Dr. Atchison and his team. Earlier, we mentioned GFSI-approved vendor programs. We're very excited to have one of our favorite speakers, Dr. Tatiana Lorca from Ecolab, who lives and breathes GFSI. Is going to be talking about approved vendor programs. And then on the 21st of February, Crystal Lowry, one of the most visionary food safety and quality assurance folks that I've ever met, is going to be talking about their automation products at Florida Caribbean Distillers. And with that, let's get to some of the questions that we have. I see several questions, Dan, on the same topic. Is this product 21 CFR Part 2 compliant?
Well, that's a great question. And yes, the SafetyChain system helps support your effort to become and maintain your compliance to 21 CFR Part 11. We do it 3 different ways. Our system is completely auditable. So everything that has been done in our system can be retrieved. You know who did it and when it was done. We also feature unalterable time and date stamps. Every record is stamped. And we also support a variety of different electronic signature formats. So the answer to your question is yes, we help companies maintain their compliance to 21 CFR Part 11.
Great, thank you, Dan. I have another question I'm going to throw to you first, Dan, and see, Dave, if you've got anything to add. This is coming from Sam, saying root cause analysis is a big part of recall best practices. I saw the bullet point on a slide. Can you elaborate how food safety chain management supports root cause analysis?
Well,
Dan, why don't you start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in our system, related to any code date or any other key indicator that you may have associated with your product or in-process products or ingredients, any test associated with that is easily searchable in our system and is trendable as well. So if there is data associated with a particular product, a particular ingredient, a particular in-process activity, it's accessible anywhere at any time. All you need is a secure internet access. So yes, the answer to that question is absolutely.
Okay.
It's very well supported for root cause analysis.
Well, and yes, and you know, and then you do have, you and I've discussed this often, the ability to go back and you see what came in, you have records of the result, you have records of corrective actions, so you know what condition it was when it left your point in the chain. Dave, anything to add to that question?
No, I think it's just it's the comment of SafetyChain, which is we're a repository of all that FSQA data. So if you have it in one electronic repository, you can search off of a key identifier, like Dan said, of a code date or a product or a lot ID. As that data comes into our system, not only are we verifying it, but then to your point, something does happen, and you need to go back and search everything from that day, for example, or everything from that lot number. As long as we capture that information on the forms electronically and it lives in the repository, you can pull it back in seconds. It's not minutes. It's not running back and forth to filing cabinets to find the paperwork and see who was working that day. It's all living in that repository, so you can very quickly access it and pull it back.
Okay, great. I see a couple people asking a question, is there a charge for suppliers? I'll answer that one quickly. No, we want to make it easy for your suppliers to do this. You know, it's change management. You know, we don't by the year either. We think the more people that use the system, the better the entire process will be. And so, no, there's no charge for the suppliers, which helps with adoption. But I am going to use that as my segue into Marina's question. Dan, I'm going to give this to you first. What do you do if a supplier refuses to update a document, i.e. basic documents or statements that just need to be updated annually if no revisions have been made? Mention change management. Dan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one.
Well, supplier documents are an essential part of any vendor approval program, and yes, what our system does is automatically update those documents as they arrive. So all you need to do as an administrator of your vendor approval program is to handle those exceptions. And do they occur? Yes, occasionally they do after automatic notification from us. But now you're dealing with that small exception percentage, not the whole mass of suppliers and all of the documents, just those exceptions that need to be personally attended to.
Right. And so you said, I mean, you know, that not every supplier is going to do exactly what you want them to do, but now instead of you having to manually go through, you know, 1,000 supplier documents, you will get an alert that this one supplier, they're one in every crowd, you know, didn't do it, and you're going to have to deal with them, as Dan said. You know, we get asked all the time about supplier adoption. It's really interesting because I spend time, you know, speaking with suppliers all the time. And believe it or not, you know, the manual processes aren't any easier for suppliers. I think everybody realizes that there's a better way. And so I think that suppliers are more willing to adopt this kind of technology than I think, you know, we all realize. I always say suppliers are people too. One of the other things that, you know, we've heard from some of our customers is, you know, purchasing gets involved. You know, at a certain point here, you know, this industry is becoming automated because it needs to be automated. It needs to be automated to create efficiencies that can keep the food industry's small profit margin intact, and it needs to be there for to promote food safety. And, you know, we've seen examples where, you know, purchasing says, hey, you know what, if you want to be a supplier, this is what we're doing. And I think we're just, you know, going to see that more and more. Dave, I have a question from Marianne for you. How much transparency is there? So, for example, you said it's a website. Can a customer log in to see all of my records? And can I control who sees what?
Yeah, the question is actually how much transparency do you want there to be? The system is completely configured in that way, meaning that sometimes when we do these demonstrations, people say, oh my goodness, does everybody have access to all my information? No, that's not the case. Absolutely not the case. The idea, though, is that if you wanted to provide a slice of information, you know, as I was showing the example today, a supplier having access to their own supplier documents, for example. We've even seen some customers now who are giving just a small slice of information, maybe outgoing COAs that our system has produced or some testing data that they've created directly to their customers. So the answer to the question is completely up to you and configurable. It's typically a very small slice of information. So the final question, I believe, there was, can I control what people can and can't see? And that's the answer. Yes, you absolutely can. And you can do that all the way down to the specific data field. So not just element roles, there are also data roles where you can combine those so a person could legitimately log in and just see one attribute of one test if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's very configurable, and it's called rules and roles-based access to the system.
Yep. And you know, we have a customer that wants to give the FDA access. I don't know if the FDA wants that. They think that, hey, if the FDA can go in and look, then maybe they'll stop knocking on my door as often. Like I said, I don't think that's going to go two ways, but I guess it could be done if all the parties want to. Jane is asking, Dave, is there a section for training records?
So we haven't developed out a training section, no. We have seen some customers similar to documents where they're tracking training expiration dates, but that's as far as we go. We do have some strategic partnerships with some training organizations that we've worked with before. Our system really was developed around that kind of FSQA data and document management. I understand that training becomes part of that, and that is where we've used things like people have certification dates, and our system could notify off those, similar to you having an expired document. So the answer to the question is yes, there is a part, but no, we haven't modularized that, and it's not something that we necessarily have gone down the path to. There's some wonderful training management vendors out in the market, and we've decided to strategically partner with a few of those as well.
Yeah, and it's great. You know, somebody asked about Alchemy. We've got a lot of customers that use Alchemy and some other systems. One of the great things about this cloud technology is, you know, we can easily integrate with a lot of other systems, including your ERP system, so that you can leverage your other investments. Jim is asking, and I'll throw this out to you, Dan. So how far does this go back to the farm or fresh products? Is GAP, I'm assuming that's good agricultural practices, audit verification there. Is there a farm GAP audit inside?
Well, the answer is we're doing that today. We have a variety of produce customers that are bringing their mobile devices to fields and doing their direct inspections to fulfill GAP requirements. Do we have a very organized and predetermined inspection form? The answer to that is no. We customize it to the very needs that each one of our customers have. But the truth and the reality of it is that once that data is entered in their mobile devices, it's accessible to the managers who are in charge of the system, and they will get notification of any non-compliant event that occurs in that GAP review. So we really have a great amount of technology around there, and the great news there is that information is available in real time to those managers and key stakeholders that need to make decisions on the fly for non-compliant events.
Mm-hmm. Dole talks about this a lot, you know, that they have inspectors with their pre-harvest inspection forms on mobile devices. They go out, they see a problem, they can actually send a picture Nye Hardy talks about, you know, being in an airport and getting a picture of some standing water, I think it was, and being able to, you know, immediately assess a corrective action and get that information back before that field was even harvested. So that's something I know that she likes to talk about. I'm going to just take a quick stroll here. Stroll. I'm going to leave and go take a walk. Scroll. Excuse me. And look, I think that was the last question. Right on time here at 45 minutes. So unless Dave or Dan, unless you see any questions that I might have missed, I think with that I'm going to tell everybody to have a great rest of your morning or afternoon. If you'd like to see more of the product and learn a little bit more about the whole concept of food safety chain management, there's still some room left. You can go to our website and register for that event. And we hope to see you online at some of these other great events coming up soon with great guest speakers. And since I haven't heard anything, I'm going to assume that you, both of you, have not seen any additional questions. So I'm going to thank Dan and Dave and thank all of you for spending 45 minutes of what we know is very valuable time with us this